Pushkin. In some ways, the most important cars in the world are our first cars. These were the cars that gave us our first real taste of freedom, not to mention our first taste of the late-night Taco Bell drive-thru. First cars are important enough to us here at Car Show that we're going to mix it up this week and do a couple of interviews with two of our favorite polymaths, Lake Bell and Rob Corddry. Lake and Rob are actors, writers, directors, and voice artists. To these multi-hyphenates, we add car people. They're going to tell us about their first cars and how formative they were to their lives and careers. I'm Eddie Alterman. On this special Hollywood episode of Car Show, we delve into the automotive lives of these two committed gearheads. First up is Lake Bell. You might know her as Agnes Adler in the movie It's Complicated, or as the voice of Katrina Peanut Butter in BoJack Horseman. She also wrote and directed the film In a World. Lake's car enthusiasm runs in the family. She grew up in Florida and New York, and her dad, Harvey Siegel, is a collector of Shelby Cobras and Special Fords, like the GT40 and the Shelby Mustang KR. In our conversation, Lake talks about everything from the car that sparked her obsession with Italian metal to finally mastering the manual transmission. But first, we play my favorite parlor game, Guess That First Car.
Do you mean the first car that I purchased with my own money, or the car that I was generously given from my father?
The car that you were given from your father. Okay, so that tells me something.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a couple of questions. Did you start driving in New York City or in Florida?
Florida.
Okay. Was it domestic or import?
Import.
And it was your dad's car?
No. Lease.
A lease? Okay. Give me three guesses. BMW 3 Series convertible?
No, sir. To this day, I'm not a convertible person. But you're kind of going in the wrong direction, to be honest.
Really?
You're giving Harvey too much credit.
So, Honda Civic?
No.
Warmer?
Warmer in the sense that it's less exotic and less sort of rich kitty, but still, a sprinkle of, I mean, there was a great privilege in the car that I have.
It's getting tough.
Well, let me say this.
Okay.
I mean, if you're a father and you don't want your daughter getting in a bender, a fender bender or whatnot after a bender, what would you want her to drive? Would you want her to be in a two-door? No. Would you want her to be even in a sedan? Probably not. If you're really neurotic and you're Jewish and you're from New York, you're going to want an SUV.
You want to put some metal around.
Yeah, you want her a little higher up.
So was it a Nissan Pathfinder?
Closer. See, now you're in the pocket. Now you're in the zone. We almost got that one.
Toyota 4Runner?
Okay, there he is. Got it.
Yes, I got it. Okay. 4Runner, that's a great choice.
He got me the 4Runner, and it was terrific. But I will say there was one kicker about it, which is just ironic, really, given that it is the 4Runner. He got the two-wheel drive.
Well, you were in Florida. You didn't need.
Yeah, but then I ended up going to Skidmore for a year. And let me tell you something, upstate New York, I bought a lot of kitty litter for the back, for the trunk, let me tell you. Didn't have a cat.
But you put snow tires on it, right?
You know what? There was like a lot of talk of putting chains on the tires, which, the 18-year-old version of myself, I was like, I don't even know where to begin with that. Like, I don't know, like, who am I going to go to? I don't want to do it. It seems like a big, because then you would drive into the city and all of a sudden you got chains on your tire. And what, I'm supposed to take them off? Yeah, you just take them off. I'm like, I'm not taking, no. So it was more just like bricks and kitty litter in the back.
Smart.
I was 18. Listen, I ended up leaving and going to England. So I left at 19 to go to England. And that's where I have my first car that I actually purchased because I saved up some money. I had $2,000. So that's going to help you figure out and guess what I consider my real first car.
Okay. So was this a car that you could only get in Europe?
I mean, no, but the thematic of the UK is heavily at large here.
Okay, so a Mini?
Yes, sir. 1987
Oh,
D-Reg.
wow. That's
And
great.
at the time, I didn't even drive stick. So I had this like real kind of block against driving stick because driving in my family was such a thing.
Yeah.
And like, if you're not going to drive, how dare you not drive stick? And, there was just such an onus on it that I was rebelling by saying, I'm going to buy an automatic. And if you think of like a 1987 Austin Mini, that's automatic. I mean, that's like a go-kart.
Yeah.
That's basically a golf cart.
Right. And you were in London. It's super parkable. That's a big kind of spectrum to go from.
I know. But in the UK, a Mini is like an SUV. I mean, you can fit 10 people in there.
I know. They're huge inside.
Kind of, yeah. I was 19 and then 20, 21. I spent 4 years in London, and that red Mini was like integral to my existence and my lifeline to my social life. I mean, I was the only one with the car, so everyone's like, "Are you gonna take that car? We'll get in."
So you were like the designated driver?
Always.
That's sort of unfair.
Yeah, but it's cool to have wheels, so you give and you take.
Yeah. Did you get the knowledge of like how to get around London? Because cabbies talk about that.
Oh yeah, we had I had my A to Z map. You would just have to look up where you're going. So you you go in the back and you're like, okay, I'm going to Shropshire, like Boulevard, whatever. And then you go SE12 or whatever, and then you have to look it up and figure it the fuck out.
And then you came back to the US. Was the 4Runner still there?
No, we sold the 4Runner, and then I moved to LA, and then I had to borrow money for this one because in LA, again, I was like, oh, I can just, sell the Mini for like $7 and then, get a car in LA. But of course, my dad was like, you drive in LA, you can't have a small car. He's like, you need a proper SUV. Like he had a real thing about like kids and SUV.
I want to talk about your family. I love that imitation of your dad. So he's a Brooklyn guy.
You know what? He is your quintessential New York gentleman Jew. So he has, my brother and my sisters and I all kind of amp up his plosives and whatnot when we do an impression of him, because if we didn't, it just wouldn't be as fun. But, the Kia, Ford GT40, you don't want to, it's low to the ground. That's how he speaks. And then my mom has like a really sort of like the opposite of whatever that is. So she has a very sort of soft-spoken, sort of more quintessentially kind of waspy sound. So they have a real vocal cocktail. And speaking of sounds, I mean, often when I think about cars, I grew up with on race car tracks my whole life because of my father, Harvey Siegel, who owned and restored Virginia International Raceway, as well as
the best track in the U.S.
Best track in the U.S., as you know. I mean, yeah, you should. But I'd been going to like Lime Rock and the Poconos and but really VIR and then New Jersey Motorsport Park was also his, and so he had been an amateur racer and a very serious collector for my whole life. So this relationship I had with cars really stemmed from, the car world was the way in to connect with him in many ways. It's just, that's like his other children, and so there were times where it's like, oh, I didn't really know how to access and have a deep conversation with him, but he would take me to the Javits Center, to the auto show, and we would walk around, and those are really important moments, because those are like kind of my main connection point. And he enjoys telling, his children the kind of history of of certain cars, the great kind of melodramatic stories of racers and why, why Porsche is cool or why it isn't,
Yeah.
and why he prefers Fords in general. The smells and the experiential kind of connection that I have to automotives in general is just, it comes from this place. And then now I've taken on its own life within my own sort of experience.
I had the same sort of experience with my father. I got all these Talmudic lessons through the car business. He was so into cars and I inherited that from him, but that's how he taught me about the world.
Absolutely. I mean, cars are touch points for indelible moments in our life. There's a nostalgia and a sort of visceral kind of the smells and the sounds and the way the leather felt or the way the fabric felt or whatever it is about a car that really reminds you, oh, God, that's when I went to Skidmore, or, oh, God, that's when I lived right on Creek Road. Remember? And so there's utility involved, obviously. There is efficiency involved, but then there's also just God, that's your conduit to getting anywhere.
Yeah.
It's a privilege. Not everyone gets to have a car. It still ends up being this thing that's special, whether you're a single mom of 5 kids, and you need that goddamn car, or if you're just I have dreamed of this 246 my entire life, and finally made enough money to get it.
There's this kind of magic of self-guided locomotion, right? Self-directed locomotion. There's nothing better. When you're driving and in control, it's incredible. It's an incredible feeling of power.
There is a sense of sacred privacy, the sanctity of that cocoon that you've earned that can take you places. I mean, good Lord, it's magic. That's why I say it's a privilege, because we often forget and we take it for granted. But I mean, that's why there's so many times where you're driving and you're in the car and you're listening to a song and a song comes on and you're like, I could drive to Oregon, and there's something about, you're not going to do it, but you could.
Yeah, exactly.
The promise of the maybe.
How do cars inform character? One of the coolest, I thought, car character matchups was in It's Complicated, and Alec Baldwin's character driving that blue 911 Cabrio. I'm like, of course.
Well, I know. And you know what? It's for instance, there was in a world, I had to have a certain kind of 90s Corvette, and it had to be maroon. It had to be maroon, like metallic maroon, for my dad in it, played by Fred Melman,
who is the king, right?
The best.
Huge Melman fan.
And I have a whole scene in there where, the father, who's just not considering his daughter at all, says, I'll take you there. And of course, there's no back seat in that model.
Right.
So she's there's story in that of if we get into an accident, you're cooked. There's no seat for you at this table. Okay.
All about him and that sort of maroon car. It's no, it's not red.
No.
Maroon.
Oh, it's got a metallic.
Who would have a red Corvette? You can't have a red Corvette. That's totally cliched. I have a maroon Corvette.
Yeah.
That 90s color.
Burgundy, maroony. That maroon. Love it. So anyway, those are the kind of things where I really enjoy when I'm making a film or creating a character. I do think about it a lot. I think it says, in the same way that the wardrobe says a lot. You can paint a picture of what someone's morning routine might be like and what they're doing off camera if you can know what they are donning or what they are driving.
What are some of your favorite movie cars.
Well, I mean, look, Scorsese, Goodfellas for me was a really good car film. I mean, there's just something about those massive Bodie 60s, 70s caddies, the Eldorados and the Biarritzes and there's such balls to that, like to take up that much space for two doors, you're like.
Yeah, like tiny inside, huge on the outside.
Yeah, like I'm taking up some space, you know what I mean? Like it's just a little, but it's perfection.
And so grandiose, right? Like remember in that scene where she's like, oh, I thought that, the wives would be so fancy, but they were all like wearing those rayon blends. That's what those cars were. They were not like European GTs.
Yeah. And yet I understand and see the appeal in it. I mean, I have looked into purchasing one, but, I wouldn't kick one of those out of bed, but, cause also there is something so unbelievably sort of whimsical and wacky about the color schemes they had in that day. It's like all white on white and then bright cherry red interior. And it's like, that was just, that's factory. Like.
That's some wild shit.
I love it. It's got such personality. And now it's like, what kind of gray do you want?
So when you were growing up, did your dad teach you how to drive on the track?
So I was terrified of speed. I'm still not a massive speed demon. I'm more interested in the kind of Tetris driving, I call it, which is like city driving, where it's like, oh, this person's going over there. Okay, I'll go over there. It's like, oh, I see you. Okay, you're up my ass. All right, watch this. It's like, I think I probably would be more interested in like rally driving, But that said, my father did teach me to drive on a KR 500, so a King of the Road 500.
Oh my God.
He's a big Shelby Cobra guy. Yeah. And, my relationship was good with him, but I mean, that's a lot. Because remember, I had the whole like hang up about manual when I was a kid. And so I was just like, oh, shit. Like, I'm just going to fucking fuck this car up.
Was it a test, you think? Like he was saying like.
Honestly, it's cars is where he shines, right? So like he really was like, all right, kid, like get in there and let's see what we can do. And we were out in New Jersey at our country house, and that's where his like mechanics live and where we have a big garage of toys. And we were on like a gravel road and we were in the KR and he's like, go ahead, give it a go. And I was like,
mayhem.
It's
That's
mayhem.
Crazy.
Throwing it in first and then boom, bing, boom, bing, just like back, forth, back, just like such tentative clutch touching, like not, stalling, But then, of course, it's like once you get it into first, it's like the torque on that thing is like insane. You could throw it in third and you're fine,
started in third. Like, so explain what the KR is.
You're like in a Mustang like beast, basically. And it's like, I mean, it's called King of the Road. So I think, when you're coming out with balls of steel like that, I think you understand exactly what we're dealing with. It was complicated sometimes where, it felt like there was such an onus, as I said, on manual shift and all that stuff. And I would talk to my brother about it who did race. And I'd be like, I just feel like, I don't know. I can't. He's like, you can do it. Like kids in fucking rural whatever driving stick, they're like 14-year-olds driving stick trucks everywhere, to tend to farms. Like, why are you making this so neurotic? And so eventually when I was a big kid and grown up, I found a secondhand Mini that had all this like, it was a Cooper that had a bunch of aftermarket shit on it and it was lowered. And I was like, but it's a Mini. Like, why is it lowered? They're like, I don't know. Some guy from Devo owned it. I was like, really?
Really?
Yeah, it was really cool.
Oh, that's amazing.
I know. So immediately I was like, well, yeah, I need to buy this. So I went to this dealer in La Cañada. Like it was really far from my house. And I took a cab there and I fucking got there, signed all the paperwork. And the guy gave me the keys and I said, listen, I don't fully know how to drive manual. I've only done it once on a KR. And he's like, not at all. And I was like, well, could you just give me like a parking lot tutorial, And he was like, yeah, okay. So then we're just in the parking lot with this random guy, and we just, he gave me some hot tips, and because it wasn't like the onus of my cool driving dad, I just was like, I felt more comfortable in a way, to just do it. And I drove it off, and I got right on the highway and went home. And I just thought, oh my God, I literally was talking to myself. I was like, okay, it's at the RPM now, and so that became my Mini for many, many years, And so because I had this connection to the Mini, because it was my first car, and because it was like, God, my formative years in England, like, those are the years, like 19, 20, 21, 22, that's big deal. So to have it again at like 26 or whatever, one that I earned because I was like on TV shows and I could buy a car now, and it's going to be a stick, damn it. It's like, it was a real kind of moment for me.
See, I made it.
I got my fucking lowered Mini that hits on like every parking lot I went into. It'd be like, scratch,
But it's also like the antithesis of like a Harvey car. It's not like a big
exactly
block Ford.
Exactly. It was like I had to define my own automotive journey.
So what was sort of like your spark car? You know how birders talk about having a spark bird, like the first bird that they like fell in love with and got them into it? Is there one for you?
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of spark cars. When I first saw a Lamborghini Miura, I was like, I'm sorry, what? I just was like, am I dating that car? Like, is that car throwing me rhythm right now? Like, I just was like, what is happening to me?
It seduced you.
It seduced me. And there was something about the Italian cars of that era, the 70s kind of shark cars, I call them, where they're dangerous, but you love them and you're intrigued by them. And they probably break down a lot. I don't know, but it's like the De Tomazzo and the kind of these beautiful, very sexy Italian. I love Italian culture. So for me, I think that really sold it even harder to me. I was like, so then I started learning Italian just so that one day. But I also love the Cinquecento, the original. I saw them on the track, and they were so damn cute and all with such great personality and senses of humor. I was like, I can get into this. So just to go back to it, it was like, there's a sense of humor to the Mini. So I think that's what I was gravitating to. I wasn't like, oh, I want to be, sexy, badass girl yet. I just wasn't there. I was like, I'm still a kid in some ways. And I just think this is cute. And then the Miura was just like, wow, I'm going to be an adult one day. That's what I said.
Those are really interesting polls, right? Of
I know
Italian car culture.
And then, of course, it was like the Pantera. The shapes were appealing.
And so impractical. And there's in Kill Bill.
Oh yeah.
Bill drives a Mangusta. He drives
the Mangusta is amazing.
Just the wheels, the way they're punched into the body, and they're just like, just oozing. I
would kill to have a Mangusta.
Pheromones.
Yeah. You're just like, this is all kinds of wrong, and give me the keys.
I know. Like the worst car to drive, so unreliable, but so who cares? Okay. Lightning round, 3 dream cars.
Well, you got me onto the Mangusta. So let's do a little Mangusta. Let's get a 246 in there. And then I'd like a Pontiac Trans Am.
You would? With the screaming chicken?
Yeah, absolutely. I listen, I like a car with a sense of humor and with a whole, like I could build a whole character around it,
Smokey and the Bandit.
Yeah, Smokey and the Bandit, yeah. If anyone has a Pontiac Trans Am with the fucking bird and all, call me.
My friend Alana, who writes for Car and Driver, she's got one. It's brown.
Oh, I love brown. So sick. Yeah. I mean, listen, I got to talk to Alana. Maybe she needs to let me take care of it.
Next up, Lake's friend and now mine, Rob Corddry. You probably know Rob from The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, where his stand-up segments bristled with manic energy. Or from Hot Tub Time Machine, which is maybe the best movie title this side of Snakes on a Plane. He's brought his ink-black comedy to shows like Ballers with The Rock, and now the latest American iteration of Top Gear with Dax Shepard and Jethro Bovingdon. Their new season launches July 1st. We spoke with Rob about his first car and those thereafter. Why does the Trans Am always keep coming up?
Thank you for being here. You're one of my favorite closet car geek, but now you've outed yourself with your Top Gear experience.
Yep, I've finally come out. I've had the courage. You know, all my friends are like, what are you talking about? You're not a car guy. And I was like, I met you in New York. Like, I lived in New York for 12 years, and I kind of dropped the whole car thing because there's no need for it. And I don't know, I just kind of lost the fire. But then when I moved to LA, it's you know, fast to rekindle.
Oh yeah, it's a car show every day in LA. But
yeah.
I admire your bravery.
My dentist invited me to his Cars and Coffee.
Everybody's got a car show.
You know?
That's awesome. So I want to take you back to the beginning.
Okay.
And I Googled this, so it was no process of divination. I just figured I should do a little research and figure out what your first car was.
It was a 1975 Ford Pinto wagon, white with the woody walls. A right piece of shit.
And now this is a car that had a reputation for exploding if a bird so much as shat on it, right?
Oh yeah. Well, you know what I was fond of saying, because I loved that car when I had it, right? Like, it was my first car. I got it for $5, you know.
$5.
$5 from this old man who just used to drive it to the dump. And he just, you know how like you need a bill of sale?
Yeah.
Well, he actually collected the $5 that usually you just write down, but he was really by the book. So he was like, and $5, please. So I actually bought it for $5. And it wasn't the wagons, apparently, that were famous for exploding. Right. And, you know, I did a piece on this. It hasn't aired yet. It's going to be in our third season, about the Ford Pinto and its tendency to explode. And it's sort of a tongue-in-cheek piece, but it was greatly exaggerated, to say the least. Yes. Yeah, American cars were losing at that point. You know, all the great muscle cars were sort of fading away, and
they were all being smogged out of existence. Like, all the power's being choked down, and you had like the Trans Ams were making 110 horsepower and had, you know,
oh god, I drove one of those, man. I drove for Top Gear, like 1978, like the Smokey and the Bandit car.
Screaming Chicken.
What a piece of shit. I mean, it was a gorgeous museum quality car. The guy had done beautiful work on it, but he was like, yeah, trying not to take it above 55 because it'll overheat. It just spent the whole day overheating.
Yeah, I mean, the best one of those in the world is still an unmitigated piece of crap.
Yeah, it's too bad. It's too bad.
But I want to talk more about that Pinto, because, like, do you have any memorable adventures?
Oh, yeah.
In that?
Yeah. So I loved that car more than anything. I would go into, you know, whatever the East Coast equivalent of an O'Reilly's is and try and like, what am I going to do to this car? And there's nothing. I don't know what I'm doing in a car. I had no idea. I'd end up getting an air freshener or something. And I had a girlfriend at the time. I was very much in love. She was like 2 years older than me. She was in college, you know, and I used to take her out in my car, and it was a wagon. And it came, older than the dirt, man. This guy could barely walk. And he was like, and if you notice here in the bed, we've got You gotta left a pillow and a blanket there for you in case you want to take a nap while you're driving. So yeah, I used to park with my girlfriend in the cemetery.
A built-in boudoir.
Only guy that had a pillow in the back of his car, that's for sure. An old man's pillow. And it used to.
But that relationship didn't last.
No, she cheated on me. She cheated on me. No, forget. No, she probably cheated on me with somebody else's car, really. It was probably that car that killed it because the floorboard on the passenger seat was completely rusted out. So every time we went over a puddle, which in Boston was significant, like they were everywhere, she would get soaked. She would learn to like just put her feet up on the dashboard when we went over a puddle. And I would like to drive by my old house growing up right now and see if they've paved over the holes that car left in the driveway, because apparently oil is a corrosive.
Oh.
I had no idea. There were, 2-inch deep holes in that. And I had that car for maybe 2 years. Burned a hole right in there.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It left its mark. Do you have like sort of memorable associations with moments in your life and certain cars?
Those cars were long before I even realized that acting was a job that people could do. Growing up in Weymouth, Massachusetts, it's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes south of Boston. There wasn't a job that people did. Nobody ever left Weymouth, and let alone became movie actors or TV actors. So it took a long time for me to realize that was an actual goal. So I would say it would have to be, if I had any car connection to my career, it would be that my wife and I, when we were living in New York, I was on The Daily Show, and I inherited, her father had died, and we inherited a, 94 Corolla 5-speed, another piece of crap in a long line of crappy cars I've had. But that car, man, I lived in Brooklyn. The Daily Show was on like 55th and by the water, like all the way as far as you can get away from Brooklyn. And I used to race myself every single day. And if I caught the lights right, I could make it home. I think I made it home once in 12 minutes. And my friend Jim said, hey, can I get a ride home with you? He was just like, live right down the block. And I was like, you can, but I want to warn you, you're not going to enjoy the ride. It's going to be terrible. I drive like an a-hole. And he was like, come on, I'm an adult. And he's just gripping every handle in the car. I didn't hit a brake once. It's like when you're driving in New York, there's taxi driver rules. You don't look behind you. You just switch lanes.
It's one of the best driving environments in the world.
It really is.
I mean,
if you know how to do it, if you're confident in the taxi driver rules.
You cannot hesitate.
You can't hesitate. Yeah. When I constantly cut into long lines to get off here in LA, because they're not great drivers in that they're very careful drivers. They're very courteous to a fault. And so they'll be waiting in a long line to get off the highway. And I just scream right down to the very end of that line and just cut someone off. And I call it Brooklyning it.
I love that. I mean, do you think legalized marijuana has anything to do with it?
It's not helping.
The mellowness in LA.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't help.
No, I mean, I think the richest experience in New York is behind the wheel of a car, because you're so stressed out and it's moment to moment. And, you kind of, I think cars are about context in some way. Like, that piece of shit Corolla is like maybe the best car for New York City.
You don't care about it for sure.
No. And you're going to be rubbing and dinging it up. And you don't care what happens to it. I mean, do you remember all those no radio
signs? Yes. Yeah.
The car was just sort of like a delivery system for the radio, and
Yeah.
people would smash windows and just grab those like.
Yeah. I had an ashtray full of change, and that was my mistake. So my window got smashed, and they just took like $4 in pennies and nickels, and a couple of very valuable quarters in Manhattan. The quarters are like, although, have you ever heard of the Universal Life Church? It's one of those like sort of matchbook churches that you become a minister just so you can marry people.
Oh, my daughter just did that.
Yeah, sure. A lot of people. I actually married our friend Lake Bell.
You were the officiant.
I was the officiant. Yeah, I didn't marry them. So I did it originally so I could get the parking pass. I got a minister parking pass and a little thing that, what do they call those things you clip on your rear view mirror? A little thing that said pastor on it. And I had an official thing with a gold seal on my dashboard. So if I parked in Manhattan anywhere near like a block or two away from a church, I would never get a ticket.
It's like a diplomat plate or something.
Exactly. And it worked. It worked. I parked for free in Manhattan for years. Like the Daily Show was right near a church. So I just parked anywhere.
Incredible. That is
incredible.
So worth it. That's like what the kids call a life hack.
It was life hack before there were life hacks. Yes.
I wanted to talk about how after you branched out into directing and started to think about kind of the bigger picture of filmmaking, I was really interested in how do you think like cars inform character? Like when you're setting something up in like the production design or whatever. How do you approach that?
It's very, very important. And it's very difficult to convince a line producer, the guy that's in charge of the schedule and the money and the budget, that you need a 1987 GNX. You just need it for this character. It's right. or whatever the car may be. Like you have to be on like a Ballers basically, because Ballers, it's like story came second to the cars, the sneakers, the watches.
You had a McLaren on that show, right?
Unfortunately, I did not have a McLaren. I had one of those BMW i8.
i8, right?
So
i8.
It's like the fake McLaren. They tried very hard to look like a McLaren, and that car gets a bad rap. I only got to drive it a couple times, but I got air in that car. It was fun.
That was a super cool car. I mean,
yeah, it was. I mean, it didn't last long, but I enjoyed it. The very little I got to drive it. That character started off driving a Buick in the season 1 because that's the car that Peyton Manning drove. And Spencer, the Rock's character, basically had to explain to him that that's just a sponsorship deal, man. Peyton drives a Corvette. He doesn't drive a Buick. And I was like, oh. So then the next day I had the i8.
Nice.
And so then it was a long stream of pretty good cars. It's so many that I can't really even remember. The best one was the car, my final car in that show was a DBS, a big 12-cylinder Aston Martin. And oh my God, what a car. I mean, heavy, as you felt the weight of that car as you were driving, which was kind of a hindrance, but it was such it's such a beautiful. I've been an Aston Martin fan, a reluctant Aston Martin fan ever since, just because I'll never be able to afford one.
And I mean, that's great character development right there, from the Buick to the i8 to the 12-cylinder.
Yeah.
And those cars have that secret handshake, that smell. Like when you get into them, you feel like you are in some English drawing room.
Absolutely. It's like every car from the 70s has a certain smell, and those Astons they smell like money, man. And I've luckily somehow finagled my way into becoming the Aston Martin guy on Top Gear.
Nice.
So whenever there's a new Aston Martin, I get to review it. I just reviewed the DBX
707.
awesome car. I was very surprised. It's an awesome car. The Vantage, I got to, which every time I want to buy a car, I build and price a Vantage online, and it's never going to happen.
It's disgusting. I mean, like, somebody was saying that $100,000 is the new $40,000.
Yeah, man. I mean, I forget, like it's upwards. If you really want to spec one out correctly, it's almost 200 grand. I can't justify that. Even if I had that, I'm a character actor, I'm a working man for hire. I can't do that
at a very high level. But no, I understand what you're saying. It's like, I think those are just cars for traders, and for them, like 200 grand is like buying a sweater or something.
Yeah. And then they just keep it in their garage, and they put a humidifier in there and whatever they do. I don't know what they do.
There's a cruelty to that. The people who want these things the most can't get near them. But it's, Top Gear, like me, my whole job allows me access to these things. And I'm sure Top Gear is the same for you. How did you come to be on the show?
Right.
No, well, I mean, like,
it's true. I mean, it's true. I since I got to LA in 2006, 5 or 6, I have been basically monopolizing my press time by saying that I loved cars, because I was really started to get back into cars, and I was able. You have to buy cars when you're in LA, whereas you didn't in New York. And so I was able to sort of exercise that. I was never able to lease cars before. And boy, just have a car for 3 years and then you can have another great car. It was just awesome. And so, I basically just planted it in the press, and it was really just so I could get press cars, which didn't really work. And then all of a sudden, 15 years later, Top Gear called. And they were like, we're going to have 3 hosts, of course. Dax Shepard is already on. We want you to be the second one. And I was like, I didn't even let them finish their sentence. I was like, you can go through your spiel, but the answer is yes.
It's the best gig in the world, right?
It really is. I mean, it was terrifying, because I sort of on the show represent the sort of the everyman, the enthusiast.
You're the Pinto guy.
I'm the Pinto guy, right? Yeah. Jethro and Dax Shepard have a lifetime of car experience. And I just, like looking at them and driving them and kissing them and licking them, like I love them as a museum goer loves art. And, so I am that. I represent that. So on Top Gear, I have become the guy they put in very awkward, scary situations. And now they're like, okay, we're going to fill up your car with packing peanuts and you're going to have to drive around this track. And I have like basically a little tiny window and all these peanuts just sort of really susceptible to gravity. and it was just, and I hate peanuts to begin with. Those packing peanuts are like a phobia of mine, basically.
Really?
They didn't even know that at the time, but they were thrilled.
There's this thing about like that show where the cars really are a prism, for the relationship between the 3 hosts. And, what was a kind of memorable thing for you in those seasons where the car was really sort of, for lack of a better term, that kind of vehicle for the adventure, for what like a car that really said something about what you were trying to accomplish?
Well, I think it was probably my first real victory. I mean, I decided that if I was going to have any success on this show, and I mean success in terms of winning races and that sort of thing and challenges, it was going to be because I chose the best car for the job.
Yeah.
And I would actually just do research, and I would spend days trying to figure out what the right car is. Whereas those guys were like, I'm just going to get a car that I want to drive.
Interesting.
And they invariably just choose the wrong car. So it was like an off-roading race
Yeah.
to get to the top of this hill. It was made out of like lava rock, basically, this pretty big hill. And we were in Arizona somewhere, and it was gorgeous. And I'm sort of an outdoor guy. This is my sweet spot. And so I chose this 4Runner, one of the older 4Runners, you know, with all the chrome. I forget what year it was, but
Locking axles or
it
locking
was the
hubs and all that.
perfect car for this. And Dax had one of those aftermarket 4-wheel drive kits in a Ford van, the Econoline van that, they were this famous aftermarket thing. And when he presented it, I just smiled. I was like, it's going to break. It's going to break. It's breaking right now as we're talking. You should get in there and drive it. And what did Jethro chose this? I think it was like also 4-wheel drive aftermarket, big tires. It was like a Subaru. It was like a WRX or something.
Oh.
But it was totally tricked out for off-road. And he did fine. You know, he had the speed for sure, but I had all the power. And my first victory was not only getting to the top of the hill first, but then going back down 3/4 of the way down the hill and towing Dax all the way up. Because he had put a waterbed in the back of his. So I also had this big knife on my side, this big Bowie knife, and I got to take it out and like slash his waterbed.
Just compounded humiliation.
Yeah, it was the best. And he was just bummed out the whole time.
It's kind of hilarious that, like, you know, the actor comedian is the most pragmatic when it comes to the car choice for the challenges.
Well, I mean, you know, I guess that's an interesting comparison, because I mean, the way I approach comedy, to me, they're like, people say, oh, would you ever do a drama? And I'm like, well, yeah, sure. It's the same thing to me. I approach it put together a character the same way I did for, when I was doing Shakespeare years and years and years ago. I build I want there to be a light behind my eyes. And so, I am very pragmatic when it comes to making choices in acting and on Top Gear, in cars.
You're super intentional about it.
Yeah, I made one really bad choice, and it's kind of like, because I was just in a bad mood, I think, and I just shat out my choice, and I ended up with I forget what the challenge was, but I ended up with a Saab 900. and that car I gave up at one point. I was like, nah, I'm out. Here, you guys go.
I've got a whole theory about Saabs and guys who own Saabs.
Please tell me.
Oh, they want to be car guys so badly, but they just don't know what's good.
Well, this was also like, I just didn't know what to choose for this particular challenge. I don't even remember what the challenge was. And one of the producers, Dave, he would like suggest some cars, and I just took his first choice because he loved Saabs. He's the kind of guy that loves crappy cars just to just to be that guy.
I don't want to offend you if you own a Tesla, but I feel like...
No, come on, man. We've been talking for 42 minutes. You think I own a Tesla?
I knew better than to assume.
Jeez, oh my God. My wife won't even get a Tesla.
I love it.
Yeah.
But what do you have now? You have the 911 and...
I got rid of the 911 because I ordered the Bronco. I ordered the new Bronco, and I've been waiting for it for 2 years. So I finally just lost interest in it, and I canceled it. It still wasn't in production.
Yeah.
And because I ordered the Wild Track, and of course the hard top moldable roof, which is impossible apparently.
Yeah. Like,
you're seeing Broncos out there, but they're all soft tops. And so finally I just canceled that, and now I've got no car.
Really?
I mean, I've got cars, but my 1978 280Z is not a daily driver. My Sprinter's not a daily driver. And I'm waiting basically for my guy to send me a bunch of. I've never had an BMW M. I've never had an AMG, and I've never had a Cadillac V.
Okay.
but I've driven like a bunch of CTSs and a bunch of ATSs and stuff. And so finally I decided, you know what, now's the time. I'm going to get the new Blackwing.
Blackwing. I mean, first of all, how cool is the name? Blackwing.
A Blackwing, man.
So sinister.
Yeah.
And then it's just phenomenal. I mean, it's one of those.
I can't wait.
It's one of those like new digital cars that feels analog. It's right. So good. It's so like nuanced, and like it's got titanium rods in the shifter, and they just went all out on that thing.
Yeah. That magnetic damping and all that. It's if he has trouble finding one that is even close to my spec, I'm going to be heartbroken.
I think you need that.
I think I need that too.
Rob, this was amazing. Thank you so much for.
Oh, so much fun, man.
It was just so good to talk to you.
It's so great. I love talking cars.
Car Show is written and hosted by me, Eddie Alterman. It's produced by Sam Dingman, Jacob Smith, and Amy Gaines. Our editor is Jen Guerra. Original music and mastering by Ben Tolliday. Our executive producer is Mia Lobel. Our show art was designed by Sean Carney and airbrushed by Greg Lefevre. Our patron saints are Lital Malad and Justine Lang. And be sure to check out Lake Bell's forthcoming audiobook with Pushkin. It's called Inside Voice, My Obsession with How We Sound, and it comes out this November. Car Show is a production of Pushkin Industries. If you love this show and others from Pushkin Industries, consider subscribing to Pushkin Plus. Pushkin Plus is a podcast subscription that offers bonus content and uninterrupted listening for just $4.99 a month. Look for Pushkin Plus on Apple Podcast subscriptions. To find more Pushkin podcasts, listen on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.